Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about rotors. We're going to be talking about the size of the rotors, the type of rotor, and if you want to go Centerlock versus 6-bolt. So you guys complained about the Corona we drank on the live stream. So we have a Kona Brewing today. It's a little step up, not to be confused with Kona bicycles. Yeah, to start off, we're going to be going with the size of the rotor. So rotors come in 5 sizes. One's not very common, but you can have a 140 mil rotor, and that you'll find on like road bikes or a very lightweight cross-country race bike. Or you can go for the 160 mil, which is for your light trail XC rotor size. We have a 180 mil rotor, which is used for the trail enduro market. You'll usually see them front and rear on trail bikes or rear on a trail bike with a combination of the 203 on the front. A 203 is usually used in downhill applications and heavy enduro use. And then they have a rotor size that's actually a 220, which almost nobody uses, but it's for extreme downhill cases where the terrain is really steep and you really need the extra braking performance. So rotor size, the big difference is obviously the smaller the rotor you have, the lighter it's gonna be, but you're also gonna get a lot more heat in that rotor. Or if you have a big rotor, you're gonna have a large contact area, so it's not gonna get as much heat and you're not gonna get as much fade down a long descent. Also, these will provide you a little more power because there is not as much heat. I usually prefer to run the biggest rotor I can that will fit in my bike. So now that we got size out of the way, there's 3 different styles of rotor. There's your 1-piece rotor, your 2-piece rotor, and then they also make floating rotors, but they're most commonly made by a UK brand named Hope. And yeah, the floating rotors are just really uncommon. So your 1-piece rotor is the most common rotor you'll find on the market. They're pretty standard. They don't really bend that easily. They're super strong. But the only downsides are they're the heaviest rotor out of the 3, and they do run really hot. They have no other metal to transfer the heat to, so they're really prone to heat soak, which degrades your braking performance by the end of a long descent. They don't really warp, they're really strong, so it's a very good option. Next is your 2-piece rotor. They're going to be one of the lightest rotors you can buy because of the use of an aluminum center with a steel outer, whereas those 1-piece were full steel. The 2-piece sometimes can actually be used to dissipate heat and cool down the rotors for better braking performance. So the Hope floating rotors are the last rotor we'll talk about. They're really hard to warp and they're extremely light. They do have a downside though, they can tend to rattle down the trail, but the reason you run a floating rotor is kind of the bling factor, not gonna lie, but part of it is that they deal with the temperature changes really well. So as your rotor gets hot and expands, it doesn't really warp the rotor as it expands and contracts with all the heat differences from the top to the bottom of the run and then it heating and cooling throughout the day. So now that we got that out of the way, we're going to the real what? We're going to the meat.
That's what I was honestly gonna say.
So what this video is really about is Centerlocks versus 6-bolt, otherwise known as the International Standard 2000. So we're going to go over the reasons why one may be better than the other, and then which one you should choose depending on your application. So to start off, we're going to talk about the ease of use and installation. So on a Centerlock rotor, you only have 1 bolt. So the only problem with that 1 bolt is you might need some specialty tools, such as a bottom bracket tool, either one with a socket, or one of the bottom bracket wrenches to take off the Centerlock rotor. So it's really simple. Just put the tool on there and break it off easily and loosen it up. And the rotor pops right off. And to put it on, just tighten it up and torque it down to 40 Newton meters. So when you get to the 6-bolt, you have to use a Torx 25 or a T25 wrench to take each one of these off. And my only issue is when you try and loosen the bolts, look how much slop and play is in each one and how much movement you can get. So in my opinion, I found these are kind of easy to strip, and it's kind of a pain to have 6 different bolts, and you really have to loosen and tighten them in a star pattern, or you won't get the rotor perfectly centered and you'll get a little wobble to it. So 6 bolt can be a little more of a pain to install, but it's definitely not too bad, and it's just a minor inconvenience. So one of the things you want to do while installing the 6-bolt rotor is find out which direction it's going. So it's going to be going to our left-hand side. That's the direction of the rotor. But we're actually going to want to clock it to the right. So when you really clamp on that brake, and the brake clamps right here while the wheel is rolling forward, it will sit in instead of rocking. If you start up here, it will rock into place. If you clock it to the clockwise position, it will actually keep the rotor set in place so it has no rocking on the initial brake, and will set it in a lot better for you. So that's just a little trick and tip. But when you're tightening up the rotors, after it's been clocked, you want to tighten everything in a star pattern. So opposite sides all the way around the wheel. So as I'm tightening these, honestly, it feels like you're about to strip them the whole time. I'm not a big fan of Torx wrenches. They're just, I don't know, it just feels sloppy to me. But that will lead us into our next point. So when you're out on the trail, you don't need a specialty tool to tighten these up if they loosen up. All you need is a T25, and that should be in all of your multi-tools that you'll be bringing on your trail rides. So if you have something loosen up, all you do, take your T25 out and tighten it up. Whereas if you have the Centerlock, this has happened to me. You can actually tell by these little marks down here that this rotor loosened up on me on the trail. I actually used a screwdriver and a rock, and I just kept hitting it. I just kept hitting it in the clockwise position just to tighten it up a little bit. But what was cool is I could actually keep the rotors hand tight, and the rotor's still going to perform. Because the rotor, even if it's loose, is actually sitting on the spline. So your rotor will always work no matter how loose it gets. It might vibrate a little bit and get some chattery noise, but you'll always have braking performance. Your rotor will never fall off the bike. So honestly, on one of my trail rides, I resorted to just hand tightening this, and it got me through the whole rest of the ride. Unfortunately, you're not going to be carrying one of these tools around with you, so you can't get a permanent fix like you could with the 6-bolt rotor. But I think this works just fine, and if you torque this correctly, it should really never loosen up on you. And I forgot to mention, the best part about the Centerlock rotor, and almost the reason I chose to run Centerlock, was if you travel on a plane or travel around the country, you can just take your rotor off with one bolt and store it away in a safe spot so it doesn't get all bent up. It's just super simple. You get to your destination, slide it on, and tighten the bolt, and you're good to go. You don't have to worry about 6 bolts really getting lost while traveling, and it's just real ease of use. While we have the Centerlock rotor kind of loose, I can get to my next point, which is there's no pressure on these threads on the Centerlock rotor. All the pressure is on these splines. Also, there's no rock. Unlike the 6-bolt rotor where there's a lot of rock, this rotor will always be consistent and you'll get no play. So yeah, the biggest thing, these threads actually bear no weight, but the 6 bolts, every single thread on each 6 bolts gets pressure on it. That's why every new brake kit you get will come with a full set of 6 new bolts, because the threads will be damaged from their original rotor digging into them. So that's just if you think about safety. Would you rather have your brake on a spline, or would you rather have your brake hitting threads every single time you get on the brake? It's really not that big of a deal, but that's just something to think about if you're thinking between 6-bolt and Centerlock rotors.
Yeah.
So now for the best reason to run a 6-bolt rotor. So it's basically the standard. It's the international standard of brake rotors for bicycles. So basically any hub you want on the market, you'll be able to find in a 6-bolt. When you go to your local shop, if you damage a rotor one day and you just need a quick fix, they'll always have 6 bolts in stock. And basically, yeah, it's just easier to replace. And there's more options. You can get any rotor on the market pretty much in a 6-bolt. And it's not the same for Centerlocks. It's pretty hard to find a Centerlock in a shop. Most likely they won't even have one, let alone the size you need. So Centerlocks, you have to be a bit more prepared at home and have one as a spare. When you run a Centerlock rotor, you're a little more confined to certain brands. So you can find Centerlocks in DT Swiss, Onyx, Chris King, Shimano, Industry 9. So you can get a lot of the good hubs in the market in Centerlock, but they'll definitely come on some of the higher end hubs. Not saying they don't come in the lower end ones, but the lower end ones will most likely be Shimano hubs. But almost all high end hubs on the market will come with a Centerlock option. But they're definitely not as common as a standard 6-bolt rotor. But what's cool about Centerlocks is with the use of an adapter, you can actually run a 6-bolt rotor in a pinch. So if you do end up going to a bike shop and they don't have Centerlock rotors, you can pull out your adapter, put a 6-bolt on it, and you're still good to go. So Centerlock rotors, you'll find options from Shimano, SRAM, TRP, and Magura. And then 6-bolts you'll find from every major manufacturer out there. Not one brake company doesn't make a 6-bolt. Another big reason why I chose the Centerlocks over 6-bolt isn't just for the traveling ease. It's because Centerlock was the only way to get the XTR or Saint rotor with the Frieza rotors. So you get these extra fins that are really good for cooling, and it's almost like a 180 rotor acts like a 203, and the 203 Frieza rotor with the 4-piston Saint brake really doesn't wear out. It's so hard to overheat these brakes. I've only overheated them once, and that was on that Trans-New Zealand race, and the race got to a negative 46% grade. I think the average was like negative 35%, and we went for 5 minutes. So under those ridiculous conditions, only my back brake began to fade. My front brake was totally fine the entire time. So that's just a testament to how good the Frieza rotors are. And yeah, that was a real big reason in me choosing the Centerlock brake. It was my only way to get Shimano's highest end offering. So I hope you thought that video was informative. I hope you know a little bit more about Centerlocks and 6-bolt rotors. And if you have any more tech questions such as these, I'd love to do more videos. Just comment down below and tell me what you guys want to know. There's so much out there in the biking community. I'd love to cover as many topics as I can, and I'm always interested in learning new things. I'd love to hear which rotors you guys prefer, and you can comment down below. And then this is just a little teaser for what's to come. I know you guys have been complaining about my horrible audio lately, so yeah, we're gonna fix it again, just like my previous videos when I just started. We're gonna be using an Evo SS, and I hope you guys really like the difference in quality. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'll see you guys out on the trails. Cheers.